Hello again, and if you're new here, welcome. Today, I am making a cave diorama for some 3D printed kobolds I found while browsing through my STL collection. While my first set of kobolds were printing, the idea hit, so I grabbed some air dry clay and began to play with some concepts for the cave. Though I don't end up using the clay, it was still the exciting beginning of this project. Now that I have the basic concept, I begin cutting out some XPS foam to shape the cave structure. I found that this was a great opportunity to use some scrap cutoffs from previous projects. At this point, I'm not worried about the details because I will come back and shape it later. I'm just using an alpha knife at this point to cut the foam into the rough shape of the cave. Layering larger chunks on the bottom, making sure to leave some overhang and lots of room to carve in details later. If you are making this for yourself, remember to have fun with it and make it however you like, especially this step, as it makes up the base for the whole project. Now that I have the cave roughed out, it's time for the glue up. And this is where the build begins to take shape. I always get super excited for the glue up. For me, this is always where the picture in my head is given a base form. Now I can start to visualize the details and really work with the shape and form of the project. I am a very hands-on builder and struggle to visualize the final detail till I have the rough structure in front of me. For the glue, I am using Gorilla Wood glue because this is just what I had on hand. But really, any PVA glue or craft glue would work. Even the kids' school glue could work with some patience. For some tricky spots, I do use a few drops of CA glue, but it does eat the foam a little. Now that the glue is set, I go around with my knife and start to shape the cave, carving out any hard lines and blending some of the layers together, trying not to unify the layers so much that it flattens out all the wonderful randomness we got by using multiple chunks of foam instead of large pieces. It was around this point I scrapped the clay piece and moved on to building the entrance to the cave. I cut an arch out of foam and then I cut it in half, making sure that the cut was off center, and used hot glue to stick it down so that it would set quickly and I could shape the entrance. I also used small offcuts of foam and hot glue to fill any gaps or voids in the foam. At this point, any hot glue that was showing will be covered later, so it won't matter. Now that the glue is set, it is time for final shaping. At this point, I am focusing heavily on the entrance, making sure that everything looks more cohesive, cleaning up any of the hot glue that may have left strands or bubbles, and generally just getting it ready for the final coat. Now that I'm happy with the way it looks, it's time for the part I have been most excited about, the plaster. I have never worked with plaster before, but I have seen some amazing results. This was the perfect time for me to try it for myself. The Plaster of Paris I found at my local hardware store. I mixed my plaster slightly more runny than the box had said. I wanted it to spread a little thinner over the whole project, but I think if I was to do it again, I would put a few drops of paint in it for color, and in theory, to help the paint stick a little better in future steps. For the plaster, I pour the mixture over the top and bottom sections of the diorama. Using a couple of cheap paintbrushes, I spread the plaster around, looking to get a thin but fully covered layer over the full diorama. The plaster does take a while to dry, so I left it over the weekend and came back to an amazing texture that really unified the piece, and I was so happy with how well it came out from my first attempt. Once the plaster was set, it was time to paint. I used my airbrush and laid down a coat of gray primer. You do not need an airbrush for this part, but admittedly, it is a little bit faster to put down the base. But for every step after the primer, I used a brush, especially for all the main coloring and dry brushing. Also, make sure you don't forget to paint the inside of the cave if you are following along. Once the paint was dry, it's time for the flocking. To add the flocking, I use a spray bottle filled with watered down PVA glue as an adhesive. But I have found this to make the flocking really hard. So if you have any suggestions for better flocking adhesive, let me know in the comments. As far as the grass itself, I am using 2 army painter grasses, a grass green and a battlefield grass. I like the mix. It gives the grass a really nice natural look, and not one of a pristine lawn, but more like something you would see in the wild. To wrap up the build, I 3D printed a few more details to add some interest to the front of the cave. While I was doing this, I found a tiny little kobold nest, which I also printed out so that I could place it inside of the cave for just a little bit of detail. But that's going to be it for this build. Thank you for watching. I know it was a long one, but here is the final reveal.